is important to pay attention to, the reasons why people are out in the streets. And there's very real demands that people are making and that, need to be heard. In the early days of these protests, towards the beginning or the middle of January, they were a lot more organic. It was a lot more about sort of this visceral, cathartic release of real frustrations. We saw, burning of tires and cars. We saw in small neighborhood squares around the capital city, as well as in other parts of the country. And a lot of those were were sort of speaking to very real grievances, mainly about the economy, about unemployment, about the difficulties that the pandemic has only compounded, but that have existed before. I think on the one hand, some of it has been exacerbated, and long-standing issues have been exposed by the pandemic. But at the same time, while I think that is partially true, I think at the same time, it's harder to say that these communities have been totally and deliberately ignored by the political establishment. There certainly is a lot of that. There certainly could have been a lot more attention and funds and sort of government projects diverted towards the interior regions of the country. There are absolutely sort of ongoing reflexes and mentalities and working methods of the Ben Ali regime that still very much remain or are still carried by the government and by the administrative sort of bureaucracy, including the police. And unfortunately as well, the police response to those and the sort of state response to those kinds of demonstrations were swift, and they were very harsh. So, hundreds of young men, very young men, including many minors, were arrested. Those abuses absolutely have exacerbated protests. Tunisians are taking stock of where they are, where the country are, and whether things have changed for the better or for the worse for them. Whereas, there have been leaps and bounds of progress in the political realm in the country, the economic realm remains very, very stagnant and looks very much the same, as before. So I think it's definitely not this new revolution. I think it's definitely just a sign that the revolution is alive and that people take it seriously. They have sort of achieved, at least initially, a response and a reaction from Parliament and from the government. They have been talking about it. There have been commissions opened within Parliament, and the Prime Minister and the President, have discussed in speeches as well as in meetings, the ongoing economic situation and the pandemic as it exacerbates it and stuff. This is not something that could be fixed in a year or two. It is something that can get started in the next year or two, though. And I think it's going to require a much larger segment of the population than just the political elites in Tunis or elsewhere.